Hey there, and welcome to the Chrysler 62TE demo assembly series. So this is going to be part 6, where we're going to put the valve body assembly back together. But first we're going to actually test the solenoid pack for continuity and resistance. So we'll walk you through that process, take readings, and then proceed to put everything back together as it was. So if this is the first of this video series you're watching, just to kind of bring you up to speed so that you know what's going on, this is not a customer job. This is just simply a demonstration on how to properly assemble one of these transmissions from start to finish. I originally pulled this unit out of the junkyard. It came from a 2008 Chrysler Pacifica in anticipation of getting one of these in for a job, but that job fell through. Now, I had never touched one of these things before prior to working on this unit, so I wanted to familiarize myself and get acquainted with them, and that's kind of how I learned, transmissions that are otherwise new to me or that I've never touched before. So thinking about broadening my horizons and expanding the scope of what I do in terms of different units, different models, and even getting into the transaxle front wheel drive stuff. So that's kind of what you see here with respect to this video series. So anyway, let's go ahead and get a little bit closer to the bench. We'll walk you through what we're going to do with the solenoid pack, give you a little bit of information about it, how to test it if you plan on reusing it, which is not my recommendation. If I were to go through one of these units, I would replace the solenoid pack with a Chrysler OEM variant. But this information can be very helpful for you if you're simply trying to diagnose a problem and get an understanding of what may be causing some drivability symptoms that you may be having in your 62TE equipped minivan or vehicle. Alright, we have everything set up in terms of how I want it. So we have the solenoid pack itself, and then our TCC solenoid, as well as our line pressure sensor. So we're going to need to plug these two in so that we can measure them. Now, if you're looking to do this on the vehicle, you wouldn't need to bother with that since they're already going to be plugged in. Additionally, you would also have your range position switch plugged in. So if you're trying to diagnose a potential failure of the range position switch, you would simply run through your detents while you hooked up your multimeter and checked resistance at each detent. We'll do that once we have the case fully assembled again and the switch reinstalled. I broke the switch, so I'm hoping I don't have to actually go buy another one to do that. Hopefully I can get by with how it is right now, but if not, and they're not super expensive, or I could find another good used one laying around somewhere, I'll buy it and install that one so that we can perform a proper test. So anyway, if you have the ATSG manual, you're going to want to refer to page 20, and I'll put this as a inset so that you can follow along with it. Of course, I'm dropping it on the ground, but we can follow along as we go. Now, I made my own chart, more or less replicating what you saw a second ago, so I can record all the values. Now, like I said, you're not really going to reuse this, but this is good information from a diagnosis perspective. So to make quick work of this, go ahead and install like an alligator clip lead to your main test lead for positive. And for all of these tests, except for the fluid temperature sensor, you're going to install your positive lead on the number 10 pin. Okay, so refer back to the diagram. There's number 10 right in the middle. So you're going to put the positive lead on number 22 to test the fluid temperature sensor, and then just put the negative lead on 23 right next to it. Alright, so let's go ahead and begin. Let's first connect our solenoids. So I broke the little locking tab on this. I mean, it is what it is, I guess. Always breaking stuff. Not good. Okay, to undo this, you just press this in and pull. Alright, grab my pencil. And the first thing we're going to test is going to be the low reverse clutch solenoid. So if we look at this chart again, and you'll see it on the screen, there's going to be 5 different locations on here for pressure switches. The manual refers to it as pressure switch resistor, but it's basically a pressure switch, and it functions just like a pressure switch in any other like kind component. So first up is going to be the number 2 position. That's going to be our low reverse clutch solenoid, and we want to see somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 ohms. So it looks like 1.9, that's fine. And just so you're aware, if you do this test multiple times and there's different ambient temperatures or in different ambient temperature regimes, your resistance values are going to change with those ambient temperature changes. Okay, there's a little bit of glare there, so we'll hit this again at 1.9, and then the TCC clutch solenoid is supposed to be 5.2, that's fine. I mean, you don't want to see any values just way outside the specified range. I think I recorded 5.5 for some stupid reason. I mean, even a value of 5.5 would be fine. Okay, next up is going to be the number 7 position, and that's going to be our underdrive clutch solenoid. And we want to see 2, and we see 2. Let me do that one more time. This is going to be position 7, and we want to see 2 ohms, 1.9, 1.8. It's fine. Okay. Next position is going to be pin 11, and this is going to be our first pressure switch, so we want to see 300 ohms here. It's going to be diagonal, lower to the left, and that's what we see. And I apologize, it's kilo ohms, not ohms. Alright, line pressure solenoids next. That's going to be at position 12. So it's going to be right under or right below position 7. Should be 5 ohms. I think we're seeing 5.3, so that's fine. Alright, 2-4 pressure switch. That's going to be another resistor. So that's going to be position 14, and that is going to be here. And 0.304 is fine. And position 15 is going to be literally right next to it. 305. And the low reverse pressure switch, that's going to be at position 16, and 16 is going to be at the far right. It's like 304. Position 17 is going to be our low clutch solenoid. So it's going to be right here at this last full row. And we want to see 2 ohms. We see 1.8, that's fine. And then we got the last pressure switch, that's our line control pressure switch. And that's going to be position 19. Excuse me, 18, not 19, 18. 304. Now position 19 is the overdrive clutch solenoid. Two ohms is what we want to see. 1.8 is what we actually see. That's fine. And then direct clutch solenoid immediately to the right of it. And same deal. We want to see 2. We see 1.8. Okay, last test at where the positive lead is on position 10 is going to be our 2-4 clutch solenoid, and that's going to be at position number 21. That's going to be this far left pin here at the very bottom row, 1.8. We want to see 2. I recorded 2. We'll record 1.8. Alright, now we're going to go ahead and move this to pin 22, and then we're going to test a fluid temperature sensor, and we should see 11,000 ohms. We got a value of 16.47. Make sure and double check to validate I have the positive lead in the right position. I do. And this little white index, paint pen mark is just to index this at 12 o'clock. So everything's relative to that in terms of position. Interesting. 16.46 is what I'm going to record. Alright. So other than maybe that temperature switch, maybe that's malfunction, maybe this thing had a code for transmission fluid temperature switch or sensor, everything else appears to be fine with this thing. Alright. So the solenoid pack is not intended to be disassembled. You really can't, as far as I know, purchase individual solenoids like the one you see right here, from Chrysler or anybody else, to install into this, broader assembly. So if one of these solenoids or switches are bad, the whole thing has to go. And like I said, because of the, just the amount of work it takes to get to this thing when the transmission's back in the vehicle, I strongly recommend that you replace it with an OEM Chrysler part. Alright, so let me take this out of the way. Unplug this. Again, I broke the tab. Is what it is. So the only part of this whole assembly that you can actually service is the little filter screen here. Okay, you take that off, you'd wipe this down, maybe a little quick dry cleaner or solvent or something. CRC makes that QDC cleaner that I have, so I might do that with this. And then you would put a new solenoid filter screen on. So as you can see, it's a little bent out of shape. So if you are going to reuse this, make sure you replace your solenoid filter screen no matter what, and clean out all your little channels here. Make sure there's no damage or obvious problems with it. Okay, so that is the story with the solenoid pack. What we're going to do now is, I'm going to clean that up off camera, but then what we're going to do is put this whole assembly back together, torque everything to spec. We're going to make sure we put our check balls in the correct location. We'll go over the gaskets that are now available from Transtech in the aftermarket, because we're going to put more valve body to plate gaskets on here than we took off. So let's go ahead and do that now. Alright, we have all the parts we need to put the valve body assembly back together, but I want to cover a couple of things before we begin. So I decided to spring for a Transtech valve body gasket set for these units, just simply because, it's just cleaner from a video presentation perspective. And I'm glad I did, because I had no idea that Transtech actually includes 2 additional gaskets for 2 locations where the factory did not install gaskets. So you're going to have your inner spacer plate over here, and your outer spacer plate over here, along with your valve body support plate. The support plate is the aluminum thick plate, and the sheet metal plates are your inner and outer spacer plates respectively. So the factory did not install gaskets between the 2 sheet metal spacer plates and the valve body housing itself, and that kind of allowed for cross leaks to develop over time as the transmission racked up miles. So what Transtech did is they manufactured 2 additional gaskets to go on either side of this casting between the 2 plates, so that you would effectively eliminate the possibility of cross leaks occurring when you went back together with it. So that's the first thing. The second thing I want to cover has to do with the check balls. So as I mentioned in the teardown video for this, for this valve body for the series, you have 4 non-captured check ball locations. Okay, then you have your 9 captured check balls. So the 4 captured or non-captured check balls are here, 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 and here. Some of these models have 3, like this one did. Others will have 4. For this valve body, there was no check ball in this location, so we're not going to put one back in. The other thing I should mention is these plastic retainers like to pop out, so I'm probably going to keep the 3 pieces of tape in place. You would never do this on a reassembly for an actual rebuild, or if you were just simply overhauling your own valve body, but I'm going to do it because I don't feel like having those things constantly falling out on me while I'm trying to go through this assembly video. Alright, so let's get a little bit closer. We'll put the check balls in, then I'm going to show you how to order everything in terms of the sequence of parts so that you can put all these gaskets, plates, valve body, channel plate, and solenoid pack back together correctly. Alright, so here's the Transtech bulletin real quick if you want to take a look. You can pause the screen and take a screenshot or a picture or something. I'll have it somewhere as well on screen so that, you know, as we're going through this, you can kind of follow along. All right, so here's our original channel plate to inner valve body spacer plate gasket. I mentioned in the previous video when we tore this thing down that I was going to try to preserve that gasket, but I mean, that just doesn't make any sense. So here I have the channel plate itself. I've numbered this 0. It was originally going to be 1, but I didn't even think to number it, so that's why it's 0. Okay, our first gasket is going to be this gasket here. That's going to go between the inner spacer plate and the channel plate. Okay, just like this. And then this next gasket is going to go on the other side of the inner spacer plate and face the valve body itself. So let's go ahead and install our check balls. So we're going to put a check ball here. Check ball here. And this check ball just, I guess, doesn't want to go back in, but it's going. And that's where that check ball is going to live. Alright, so let's go ahead and start installing our gaskets. So this gasket here, which I have labeled number 3, this is new. This is from the Transtech kit. It's going to go in this position. There is no factory counterpart to this gasket. Then you have the inner spacer plate itself, and then you're going to have your gasket that goes between the channel plate and the spacer plate. Alright, now you'll notice 4 bowl hole locations right here. They're going to correspond to these 4 bowl hole locations on the channel plate. Alright, so now what we need to do is flip all this over. And from the, number 4 numbered component through the number 7 component, install the rest of this stuff. So here's your number 4 gasket. This gasket is new. It does not exist insofar as the factory is concerned. Now you have your outer spacer plate, your outer spacer plate to valve body support plate gasket, and your channel plate. Okay, these little worm tracks, they face inboard. Alright, so now we need to install our solenoid pack. So what I'm basically just doing is lining up this somewhat rectangular formation with the witness mark here on the plate. And that should get me home. Alright, so now what we need to do is carefully invert the assembly so that we can install all of our bolts. for the channel plate through to the solenoid pack. Alright, so I'm just going to keep a handle on it while I start threading in some bolts. Okay, all your long bolts are going to go into all these bolt hole locations through the channel plate. And I should have been a little bit more prepared with everything here, but you know, that would have made way too much sense. So 53 inch-pounds on all these bolts, which are Torx 25, or take a Torx 25 socket. Alright, now I can relax with it. So I'm going to insert the rest of the bolts, and then we'll run them all down and torque them up. And I'm also going to install the two solenoids on the other side before I finalize everything in terms of running the bolts down, because I want to make sure that everything aligns and that everything can be reinstalled as far as all these bolts are concerned. So I just get them started. So yeah, I'll do that again. It was kind of a little bit out of view there, bad angle. So just goes like this. And then be careful of this gasket down here by my hand, because temptation is going to be to, you know, mess it up. And try not to flip your solenoids on the bench like that. Like I said, these are old solenoids, but you know, you still want to have the same duty of care that you otherwise would with the new stuff. Okay, 53 inch-pounds. I'll need that extension, so I'm going to lose it. So I'm just going to start with this middle row in a channel plate and kind of work my way out. I don't recall seeing a tightening sequence mentioned in the ATSG manual. So, you know, like anything else, just kind of start in the middle and work your way out. You can work your way out in a spiral pattern, or you want to just go row by row, you can do that. It's kind of how I'm going to approach it. Main thing is you don't want to forget any bolts. It is kind of awkward working on this thing, just because you know, you got a solenoid pack on the other side. You obviously don't want to screw that up, damage it, or break anything. You know, plus your other two solenoids there. Probably a couple of like real, I don't know, tall blocks of wood, maybe 2 or 3 of them to support this thing, so that you can torque these bolts is a good idea. Especially if you plan on working on these things frequently, like doing them regularly. Check this one real quick. Don't remember torquing that one. Let me check this one too. Alright, and the other thing is you may have to go over these a few times before you get final torque. And what I would probably recommend is that you don't go through this torquing and tightening sequence at the same time or within the same shift that you plan on reinstalling this valve body if you can help it. I would actually go through and torque everything up, maybe go around once or twice, and then revisit it maybe in, I don't know, 8 to 12 hours, maybe the next day, and re-torque everything. Because my suspicion is that it will take multiple rounds of tightening and torquing to fully compress these gaskets. You got 4 gaskets where you previously had 2, so it's probably going to take a little bit more effort in that regard to fully compress them. All right, 53 inch-pounds. All right, just go ahead and install your connectors. That's basically it. So, valve body demo is completely reassembled and ready to bolt back onto the case.